The year is 2015, and fan manufacturers seem to be doing pretty well, especially Matsushita, which has been one of the top manufacturers of fans since they dominated in the 90s. No one has ever caught up to them ever since. They were selling a ton of fans, they had a ton of series, and there were more to come. There was a lot more in store for Matsushita at this year. At least, that's what the CEOs and higher-ups made us to believe. So, what was it? What made this year especially special for a lot of fan manufacturers? Well, it's just one answer: profits. So, fans so far from this point have all been relatively the same since the 2000s. No technical innovations have been made to fans at this time, and even Asahi was just starting out with their DC inverter series by this point, and it was horribly expensive. Now, everyone was trying to get wattages lower for the modern times because for some reason energy efficiency is a thing now, and everyone was thinking about it. Back in the 90s, when there were fans like these, well, energy efficiency? Oh, that wasn't in the equation at all. So, fan manufacturers just made what they want in here. And Matsushita went crazy with a lot of stuff, with good quality fans. And yeah, they basically destroyed all the other manufacturers. And even a few companies just straight up just joined Matsushita by this point. So it was clear Matsushita was heading in a direction that no one else could. Because back in the 80s and 70s, two brands were dominating, or three. The big three were Hitachi, and then Standard and 3D in reverse order. Honestly, in the 70s, Standard was everywhere. And then in the 80s, 3D was everywhere, and maybe Hitachi. But in the 90s, all the hopes and dreams of those three companies would be crushed since 1989. Because in 1989, Matsushita set the tone for the future by introducing the 40 series. It's technically their bold modernization of classic designs. And in 1989, yeah, that mix was obvious. Back then, when every company were still boxy, in all honesty, Matsushita had gotten rid of the super boxy corners and finally modernized the fans' look. And even by this point, some people think these fans are modern just because they look like they're new, even though they're not. It was that modern. And when everyone else was like this, and even Asahi by the 90s and early 2000s still had their boxy series fans, which was the LS6016, which was still in its first body, and the DF6004, which I just showed previously. At least that was the 1980s version. But here's the modern version, and it's not that different. Yeah, the head's a lot more modern, but it was still old in the body. Meanwhile, Matsushita in the 90s was already doing a lot of stuff. And the 40 series was just clean, it was quiet. That was a thing because most fans before were not that quiet. The 40 series was. They were powerful, and even the 97 ones, they're still powerful. And it's still the Japanese Matsushita motor. And in all honesty, it improved upon
the 1984 riveted motor, which honestly was kind of pathetic. I've seen more of these being like dead than the Matsushita, and there's less of them. So every time I saw one, it was broken. Like, come on, can't get that motor right? Oh my god. It was a very bad fall from the 1978 motor. But yeah, the 1989 40 series kept that alive, while being a new compact design that didn't compromise on its durability. And by the 2010s, if you wanted something that just worked, it was a Matsushita. You would have bought a Matsushita, though by that point they switched to open motors. So let's go back to 2015, where innovation was basically dead and everyone was just thinking of profits. Except maybe Asahi, because they're technically the last brand to be still good, and they've kept their designs, their modern, newer designs from the 90s, which technically were kind of inspired by Matsushita, because Matsushita was technically the first one to modernize their designs. But now we know those iconic Asahi fans as DR mate models, and until now they're still the best you can get. But this is not a video about Asahi. This is a video about the Nidek motor. But yeah, let's just set the tone for the video. So yeah, everyone was thinking of like how to cheapen up the fans, and technically PTC already did it. So any brand under PTC, technically Hanabishi, Dowell, everything just started using that pathetic motor. And it was a very far downfall from the older CVCs when CVCs were still good. And honestly, there are still good CVCs right now. Technically, the round CVC bronze bushing and the square CVC. But we're not talking about that. Even though Matsushita did use a PTC CVC in their 40 series, this is not about the 40 series. It's about the 405. Now, so 2015, Panasonic and KDK finally released a new series of electric fans. It was supposed to be a leap forward for Matsushita because everyone else was honestly already on the 60 watt range. Meanwhile, at this point, Matsushita was still on the bulkier 780 or 80 watt motors. And even though it was not a Matsushita motor, it still consumed that much just because they had to make the motors thicker to handle the Matsushita blades. And honestly, at first, people were pretty excited, and what looked like progress quickly turned into a cautionary tale of poor engineering, broken trust, and a broken legacy. And this is how the 405 became the most hated fan. So when the 405 series came in 2015, it was a big leap forward, at least for Matsushita. With a modern look, the tighter assembly tolerances, in all honesty, the build was really good on the 405 series. And the more efficient 60 watt Nidek AC motor, it seemed to improve on everything. Because Matsushita came to Nidek in this year and told him, hey, we need a new motor, we need something efficient, at least 60 watts. And Nidek, being also Japanese, would have accepted gladly. And they came up with this atrocity, the Nidek motor. The Philippines was honestly ready for a new fan. Energy prices were rising, the 405 promoted savings and style. Early adopters praised the build quality. The fan honestly felt solid, and even I found it solid in the 3 units that I had, which was the 2 F405LBs and the single S405B I had. And the S series, they honestly look pretty good. Just look at these grills. It was honestly a nice touch. But hidden inside all of these things was the time bomb itself. So if we look at the Nidek motor, it was a total shift from the previous motors that Matsushita used, because in a traditional sense, the motor usually was longer than the front shaft. But this time, something was not right. And if you look at the image I'm pulling up here, the shaft is much longer than the motor body itself. It was too short. So the fan's bushings, the ones that reduced friction from the shaft, which all motors do have to have, it was just forced to carry more stress just because of physics itself. I will explain more on this flaw in the fan cleaning video, but it was more than what they were designed for. And considering how badly the bushing holders were designed in this thing, I'm not surprised. In many units, they failed pretty early, some early as 3 months in, and bushings would just wear out pretty quickly. And in my units, the 2017 F405LB started failing in 2018, which led to the second 2018 F405LB to be bought, which only lasted up until 2020. The 2017 one died early in 2019, and that was meant to have a replacement as the SF40V. But the SF40V wasn't much better, honestly. But yeah, back then the PTC CVC motor was honestly okay, so we thought it was fine. And I saw the motor cover looked like my National, so why not? But they bought another fan, and they thought it was the same KDK, which led to the buying of the S405B, which was my most iconic fan, at least in terms of being bad. And when the years passed, people finally started noticing that these things were ticking time bombs. And in 2020, you all know what happened to my S405B. And before that, it failed 6 months in 2019, just before I made that video. I recall mentioning that the S405B was already failing before I even made that review. It was that bad. At first, the complaints were honestly pretty scattered. But yeah, in 2018, everyone was noticing. The groups, tech forums, and appliance reviews just started noticing the horrible things that this Nidek AC motor, which was supposed to be their future, sucked very badly. And one of them was my old friend Dan Tanner, who saw me struggling with a 405 and told me to just get rid of it. I didn't technically listen. I made an example out of it. But yeah, this is another case like my S405S. I'm not gonna let them live this down. It has to go in history as their mistake, and why the fan industry shouldn't go too far into cheapening out on these things. But yeah, by 2020 and my video, it was clear. What used to be the most trusted fan brand in the country was now the punchline. They were abandoning it left and right for brands like Asahi, Camel, even the recently degraded Hanabishi and other brands. Even 3D, who had technically burned, well, it was a rewind, but honestly it almost burned my house down in 2018, which honestly also led to me buying the SF40V. That was technically its complete replacement. So yeah, it was horrible. At least the Nidek motors didn't burn, but yeah, 3D had its own quality issues. And we don't even want to mention Standard, who had switched to a Sempro in 2016, not long after Matsushita started producing these 405s. But yeah, the fan industry was just not having it anymore. There were basically no more reliable brands unless you look into what motor your fan was using. You could have a time bomb in your hands. Those brands also cut corners, but at least they were more honest about it. And they were usually cheaper. Well, except Asahi. Why did I say Hanabishi? It's Asahi. But ironically, those inferior fans outlasted the much more expensive 405B and S series. Updates to the design could not fix the core issue, the bad motor. It was just like putting a fresh coat of paint on a car with a blown engine. It was already done. The damage was already done to their brand. It had made a crucial mistake replacing the proven and reliable 40 series despite having higher wattage with a flawed experiment. That's what I can just call the 405 series. And it took them 5 long years to respond, and even their first prototypes with the 409 used an even weaker version of the Nidek AC motor reduced to 49 watts and had an even thinner stator. That didn't help. But finally, in 2020, they finally got it right. The 409 series arrived. Still, Nidek was the motor producer, but Nidek was known for good DC motors, not AC motors. So when they finally got it right, it just redeemed the series entirely. The 409 is what the 405 should have been. At just 30 watts on the max speed, the 409 was the most efficient Matsushita fan, at least over here. And I'm not sure, but I feel like it's even more efficient than the international models. It brought back elements from the 40 series, the N series specifically, of the 409s, brought back the X or P body design language. So it was like, hey, we're sorry, we're bringing it back. And they technically brought back the classic grille shape for the lower end series, though it has a lot more rings, but it just meant it was sturdier. And then it fused it with the design of the 405, at least for the more premium models. The 405S grills was taken and into the design of the 409D and N series, which, yeah, mostly the ring lock was responsible for the shape this time, but it was still relatively the same design. Most importantly, it was inverter. For the first time, inverter fans were actually affordable and reliable. Panasonic and not Asahi made it mainstream. And it's still true. A lot of inverter fans here in the Philippines are still sold by Matsushita themselves. And even Asahi had to switch to Nidek DC as well, just to lower their prices. So they were basically being undercut by Panasonic here, and they were winning very, very well. And yeah, if you wanted an inverter fan, you just go with Matsushita or Asahi. So yeah, it led to Asahi releasing a lot more inverter models after this, because back then they only had the DC6072, which cost like 7,000 at the time, and that was too much. The 409N at their most expensive was 5,000 pesos. A lot less expensive than the Asahi ones. But yeah, it sold like crazy. Matsushita finally got it right. And the 409 series quickly killed off the 405 line. No updates, no farewell. It was just quietly phased out. Well, except the B series. They're still everywhere. I don't know why Matsushita would not just kill the B series at this point. Just kill it. You already killed completely 90% of the 40 series, with KDK being the last ones to produce the 40 series, since the DYP and WYP was just killed last month. So yeah, the shadow of the 405 still lingers. The name Panasonic or KDK doesn't bring comfort like it used to. At least for fans, the damage to the brand wasn't just a bad product, it was betraying the people of what they already know as a good product. The 40 series was the most iconic series for a very long time. It was like from 1989 up until now, even with the W40Y, it was the longest running model that Matsushita has, and I don't think they'll kill it yet, because good thing the 405 series never released with desk or wall fans. The 409 did release with the desk fan, so it killed off the DYP, but yeah, that's fine. It's a good product. So yeah, they took away something that worked, replaced it with something that didn't, and only looked the part on the outside, and only after years of backlash did they offer what they should have from the start. And honestly, I think Matsushita knew this, that the 405 was not going to be a permanent fix for them. They already saw that 60 watts even was just the standard. So if they wanted to get ahead, they needed to get ahead. But they did it in a way that destroyed consumer trust. And that is something that's never going to be forgotten by the people who love the fans of Matsushita before. And that goes with me too. I'm honestly ashamed that the 409 series and the Y series 40 series are the last ones from Matsushita. And even the Y series, they're reduced to a few models at this point, and the E series. So yeah, it's basically 4 models of the 40 series. So it's dead. The old legacy is gone. The 405 series could have honestly been a milestone. Instead, it's just a cautionary tale of cost-cutting, poor engineering decisions, and what happens when you forget why people trusted you in the first place. Matsushita didn't have a high wattage because just for fun. It was there because their fans were powerful and reliable. But now, that was completely gone. Only partially being restored by the 409 series. So, sometimes progress isn't about shaving off watts or chasing the new fan trends and designs. It's about knowing what made people choose your fans in the first place. And don't let go of that, because Matsushita was honestly known to be the most premium fan brand, but today it's Asahi, not Matsushita, at least in the Philippines, which use a ton of fans and have a lot of fan enthusiasts. And not all fan enthusiasts are technically knowing of all the things that happened to this series. But that's it. The 405 series did everything but being reliable, and that's why it became the most hated fan in Philippine history. This is Razor2875, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay cool.